Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be discussing a theory that I've been working on for a while, and that is that the Star Wars sequels are not only bad, but they are intentionally bad, and they are actually a genius satire on sequels as a whole. The Force Awakens is basically just beat for beat A New Hope. In fact, if you showed this to me without any context, I would probably think that it was a soft reboot of A New Hope. And the entire movie feels very formulaic, very generic. Like you asked AI to generate a Star Wars movie, it would probably come up with something like The Force Awakens. Everything down to the last detail is just a clone of A New Hope, but done a little bit worse. And so this is the first kind of sequel that the sequels satirize, which is just a sequel playing it too safe, a sequel that didn't really need to be there. It does all the right things, it checks all the boxes, but it doesn't do anything new. The second sequel, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is the polar opposite of that. It takes everything that Star Wars does and sets up and just messes it up. It does all kinds of wacky stuff with the Force. It takes Luke Skywalker, a very established character and known for seeing the good in everyone, and flips that on its head for basically no reason. And it basically goes out of its way to try and shock and surprise you. And this is the second type of sequel that the Star Wars sequels lampoon. And that is a sequel that does everything wrong. They take everything and they just throw it out the window. In fact, it even gets to the point in The Last Jedi where it seems like the writers almost hate Star Wars, and they basically ruin everything. The final sequel in Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, shows complete and utter creative bankruptcy. They had written themselves into such a corner with The Last Jedi that they really had nowhere to go. And so they bring in a previous character which was very obviously dead up until this point and had zero foreshadowing whatsoever. And they try to make him the villain again for one last hurrah. And you almost feel relieved when The Rise of Skywalker has finished, because you have this sense of, oh, well, at least it's over. And so The Rise of Skywalker is just such a great ending to this sequels that satire sequels, because you had playing it too safe, going way too out there, and finally completely running out of ideas. And so that's why I think the trilogy is just a beautiful showing of how bad sequels are in the current day. And this may seem groundless, but allow me to introduce to you Kylo Ren. And I think that Kylo Ren is my strongest case for this being true, because the whole point of Kylo Ren is that he really wants to be Darth Vader. He puts on a similar mask even though he doesn't need to wear it. He mimics his general personality, but he gets upset, he throws tantrums, and he can very obviously never measure up to what Darth Vader was. And it's very obvious that they made him to be that way. In fact, Rey even calls it out towards the middle-ish of Episode 7, where she basically reads his mind with the Force, and she says, "You will never be as good as Darth Vader." And it's like, duh. And so they established this very well. He is trying really, really hard to measure up to the original, but he just can't. And that is why I think that the sequels were intended to be as bad as they were, because they knew that they could never measure up to what the original trilogy was. And so they decided to go the other route and decide to lampoon sequels as a whole. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.